Remember when tractors were steel behemoths that could break your arm just trying to start them? From steel wheels that tore up roads to fuel systems that ran on lamp oil, these machines were engineering marvels of necessity. Let's take a journey back to when farming was as much about muscle as it was machinery, exploring 13 forgotten features that defined American agriculture. Number 13. Steel wheels with lugs. Before pneumatic tires revolutionized farming in the 1930s, American tractors rolled on massive steel wheels equipped with aggressive metal lugs. These weren't just wheels, they were weapons of traction. The Hartpar No. 3, built in 1903 and now residing in the Smithsonian, exemplifies this era with its 14,000-pound frame supported by steel wheels that could bite into any terrain. The lugs, which looked like metal paddles or cleats bolted onto the wheels, provided incredible grip in muddy fields. Farmers could add or remove individual lugs based on field conditions, customizing their traction like a modern race team adjusting tire pressure. But here's where it got interesting and controversial. As tractors became more common in the 1920s, farmers needed to drive them on public roads to reach distant fields. Those steel lugs that worked miracles in the mud became destroyers of pavement. They punched holes in macadam roads and shattered wooden bridge decks. By the mid-1920s, signs reading "Vehicles with lugs prohibited" sprouted across rural America, creating a crisis for farmers who suddenly couldn't legally move their equipment. Some states, like Michigan, passed outright bans on lugged wheels on improved roads. Farmers fought back politically, arguing they were being discriminated against by speed merchants in automobiles. The solution came from manufacturers who developed rubber tires for tractors, starting with Alice Chalmers in the 1930s. Today, finding an original set of steel wheels with lugs is like discovering buried treasure for collectors. Number 12. Hand crank starting. The hand crank wasn't just a starting method, it was a rite of passage that could make or break a farmer's day, and sometimes their arm. Every American tractor from the early 1900s through the 1920s required this manual starting ritual. The Fordson Model F, which dominated 75% of the tractor market in 1923, came equipped with a heavy iron crank that demanded respect and proper technique. Starting procedure was an art form. You grasped the crank with your thumb on the same side as your fingers, never wrapped around to prevent a broken thumb if the engine kicked back. The danger was real. In April 1908, Byron Carter, founder of Carter Car, died from pneumonia and complications that developed after a car's crank handle kicked back and broke his jaw while he was helping a stranded motorist. Though some details of the story remain disputed by historians, this tragedy inspired his friend Henry Leland at Cadillac to push for electric starters in automobiles. But tractors lagged behind. Their rough operation on steel wheels made batteries impractical until the 1930s. Farmers developed tricks to ease starting, warming the engine with burning oily rags in a bucket underneath, pouring hot water over the intake manifold, or even using a shot of ether in desperate situations. Cold mornings could mean 20 or more exhausting pulls before the engine caught. The International Harvester Farmall series maintained hand cranks well into the 1940s as backup starters. Some farmers modified their cranks, creating wheel attachments for better leverage or using automotive steering wheels as cranks. When electric starters finally became standard, many old-timers kept their cranks handy, trusting iron over electricity. Today, hand cranking demonstrations at tractor shows draw crowds who marvel at the strength and skill required for this daily farming ritual. If this Iron Age farming romp got a chuckle and maybe a cramp in your thumb, do your future self a favor. Smash that thumbs up, pony up a comment, and asterisk subscribe. Because your grandkids deserve to know what a steel-lugged wheel looked like. Number 11. Flywheel starting, John Deere style. While most tractors tortured farmers with front-mounted cranks, John Deere revolutionized starting with their unique flywheel system, beginning with the Waterloo Boy and continuing through their legendary Model D introduced in 1923. Deere tractors featured a massive exposed flywheel on the left side with finger grooves carved into its inner rim. This wasn't just different, it was safer and more effective. Instead of wrestling with a crank that could kick back, operators would grab the flywheel and pull it through compression. The technique had finesse. You'd turn on the fuel, choke the carburetor, then rock the flywheel to find the compression stroke on the left cylinder. Veterans developed a feel for it, knowing exactly when to give that final strong pull. The two-cylinder Johnny Popper engines were particularly suited to this method. With only two cylinders firing 180 degrees apart, there was a natural rhythm to starting. Farmers would often use the tractor's own steering wheel as a starting tool. It had teeth that meshed with the flywheel center, giving extra leverage for tough starts. Stories abound of creative starting methods. Some farmers wrapped rope around the clutch pulley for a pull start. Others used massive wrenches on engines with covered flywheels. One old-timer reportedly won $5 betting he could start a Model A by wrapping rope around the clutch pulley, a technique learned when batteries died and no crank was available. This flywheel starting system remained standard on John Deere two-cylinder tractors until they discontinued the line in 1960, making it one of the longest-running unusual features in tractor history. Number 10. Kerosene distillate fuel systems. Imagine running your tractor on lamp oil. That's essentially what farmers did for decades. The dual fuel system was perhaps the most complex feature on early tractors, born from economic necessity when kerosene cost half as much as gasoline. These systems appeared on tractors from International Harvester, John Deere, Case, and virtually every major manufacturer from 1910 through the 1950s. The setup was ingenious: two fuel tanks, one small, usually 1-2 gallons, for gasoline, one large, 10-20 gallons, for kerosene or distillate. You'd start on gasoline, and once the engine warmed up, flip a valve to switch to the cheaper fuel. But here's where it got complicated. Kerosene required lower compression ratios, around 4.7 to 1 compared to gasoline 7 to 1, meaning these engines were specifically designed with special pistons and heads. The real magic happened in the manifold. Engineers developed elaborate systems to vaporize the heavier fuel, including exhaust-heated intake manifolds and water injection systems. That's right, water injection. Farmers would adjust a valve to drip water into the intake, preventing knock under heavy loads. Some tractors, like the McCormick Deering 1020, even had separate carburetors for each fuel. The University of Nebraska tested kerosene tractors from 1920 to 1934, with the John Deere Waterloo Boy Model N being the first in 1920. These tests proved kerosene tractors could match gasoline models in power while burning cheaper fuel. But cheaper doesn't mean easier. Farmers dealt with fouled plugs, carbon buildup, and the constant ritual of switching back to gasoline before shutdown. When diesel engines arrived in the 1950s, they quickly replaced these temperamental dual fuel systems. Number 9. Belt pulley drives. Before hydraulics and three-point hitches transformed farming, the belt pulley was the Swiss Army knife of power transmission. From 1900 through the 1950s, this side-mounted pulley turned tractors into portable power plants, driving everything from threshing machines to sawmills with leather or canvas belts stretching up to 50 feet. The numbers tell the story. A typical 10-inch pulley spinning at 1,100 revolutions per minute created 3,100 feet per minute of belt speed, enough to power massive threshers processing entire harvests. International Harvester's documentation from 1922 listed dozens of belt-driven implements, hammer mills for grinding feed, buzz saws for cutting timber, corn shellers, water pumps, and even early milking machines. Operating belt equipment required skill and respect for danger. Lining up a tractor with stationary equipment meant precise positioning. The belt had to track straight or risk flying off, potentially injuring operators. Belt lacing joining the belt ends was critical. As one 1937 agricultural manual warned, a belt is only as strong as its weakest splice. Farmers became experts at lacing patterns, treating their belts with special dressings and maintaining proper tension. The Nebraska tractor tests measured both drawbar and belt horsepower from 1920 to 1959. Recognizing the belt pulley's importance. International Harvester's model, 1530 and 1920, pioneered having both belt pulley and PTO, signaling the transition to come. But many farmers preferred belts. They could see the power transfer, hear when equipment bogged down, and quickly disengage by knocking off the belt. When the last belt horsepower test concluded in 1959, it marked the end of an era where farming meant as much about managing belts as managing fields. Number 8. Hit and miss firing cycles. Modern engines fire every revolution like clockwork, but early tractors danced to a different beat. The Hartpar number 3, America's oldest surviving internal combustion tractor, featured a hit-and-miss governor system that sounds broken to modern ears but represented cutting-edge efficiency for 1903. Here's how it worked. Instead of firing every time the piston came up, these engines would fire only when the governor detected a speed drop. Running at light load, the engine might fire once, then coast through several miss cycles. Hence the distinctive pop, 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 pop rhythm that made these tractors sound like they were dying when they were actually running perfectly. This wasn't primitive engineering, it was brilliant fuel economy. By firing only when needed, these engines could stretch fuel remarkably far. The two-cylinder design with its massive flywheels stored momentum between power strokes. At 30 horsepower from a 14,000-pound machine, the Hartpar wasn't winning any power-to-weight contests, but it would run all day on minimal fuel. The governor mechanism itself was mechanical art. Spinning weights would pull against springs, operating a latch that held the exhaust valve open during miss cycles. No compression, no fire, no fuel used. Farmers learned to tune these governors for different work, tighter for heavy pulling, looser for belt work. The sound became so associated with early farming that tractor shows today feature slow races where hit and miss tractors compete to run the slowest without stalling. John Deere, International Harvester, and others gradually abandoned hit and miss systems by the 1920s for throttle-governed engines, trading fuel economy for smoother power delivery. Number 7. Open operator stations. Forget air conditioning, heating, or even a roof. Early tractor operators faced the elements with nothing but an iron seat and sheer determination. From 1900 through the 1940s, American tractors offered zero weather protection, creating a breed of farmers tougher than the steel they rode on. That metal seat wasn't just uncomfortable, it was a torture device. Cast iron or pressed steel, usually perforated with holes that supposedly provided ventilation, but really just collected water. These seats had all the comfort of a park bench. The International Harvester Farmall series epitomized this Spartan approach: a bare seat, exposed controls, and the operator perched high above massive rear wheels with nothing to grab if things went wrong. Weather wasn't just uncomfortable, it was dangerous. Rain made metal controls slippery. Snow blocked vision and numbed hands trying to operate stubborn clutches. Summer sun heated metal seats to cooking temperatures. Farmers carried burlap sacks to sit on. Dust from plowing could be so thick operators wore goggles and bandanas, looking like desperados while simply trying to plant corn. Safety was an afterthought. No rollover protection meant overturns were often fatal. Tractors killed more farmers than any other farm equipment. No fenders meant mud spray. No mufflers meant deafening exhaust. Ford's 9N, introduced in 1939, finally included fenders and a more comfortable seat, but full weather protection didn't become common until the 1960s. Some farmers built homemade cabs from wood and canvas, but most simply endured. As one old-timer put it, if you couldn't handle the weather, you couldn't handle farming. Today's climate-controlled cabs with air-ride seats and stereo systems would seem like science fiction to those iron-tough operators. Number 6, manual spark timing. Before electronic ignition made timing automatic, tractor operators were part-time engineers, constantly adjusting spark advance to match engine conditions. That lever on the steering column or dash wasn't a turn signal, it was the difference between smooth power and a blown head gasket. The principle was simple, but critical spark timing needed to change with engine speed and load. Start with the spark retarded, late, to prevent kickback during cranking. Once running, advance it for power and efficiency, but advance too far under load, and destructive pre-ignition would hammer bearings and pistons. Every operator developed an ear for the engine's song, listening for the sweet spot between knock and sluggishness. Early magnetos made this especially tricky. The John Deere Model D featured a lever marked start and run, but finding optimal timing between those points required finesse. Fordson operators dealt with a quadrant marked in degrees, meaningless to farmers who learned by sound and feel. Heavy pulling demanded different timing than belt work. Cold weather needed different settings than summer heat. The real skill came during work. Plowing through varying soil conditions meant constant adjustment. Hit a hard spot, retard the spark to prevent knock. Drop into loose soil, advance for power. Experienced operators could reach for the timing lever without looking, making micro adjustments like a musician tuning an instrument. Some tractors featured automatic spark advance mechanisms by the 1930s, but many farmers disabled them, trusting their ears over springs and weights. The advent of distributor-based ignition with vacuum and centrifugal advance in the 1940s finally automated this task, though old-timers complained the tractors didn't sound right without manual control. Number 5, water injection systems. Long before hot rodders discovered water injection for performance, farmers used it to keep their kerosene-burning tractors from destroying themselves. This wasn't high-tech, it was survival engineering that turned water into an anti-knock additive decades before premium gasoline existed. The system appeared on tractors from McCormick Deering, John Deere, Rumley, and others running on low-grade fuels. On the John Deere Model D, a simple valve tapped into the cooling system fed water directly into the intake manifold. Rumley oil pull tractors featured elaborate setups with separate water pumps and adjustment valves that operators controlled like conducting an orchestra. Why water? When kerosene engines worked hard, combustion temperatures soared, causing pre-ignition that sounded like someone hammering the pistons with a sledge. Water vapor absorbed heat, cooled the charge, and prevented this destructive knock. The trick was getting the amount right. Too little, and the engine knocked. Too much, and it misfired or stalled. Different manufacturers had different approaches. Some used float-controlled carburetors that automatically fed water under load. Others required manual adjustment. farmers developed a feel for when to give her a drink. The McCormick Deering 1530 featured dual bowls, one for fuel, one for water, mixed at the manifold. Cold weather complicated things since water froze, leading some farmers to use alcohol mixtures or drain systems nightly. The practice continued into the 1950s on distillate burning tractors. Modern farmers running antique equipment often disable water injection, using higher octane fuels instead. But at vintage shows, you'll still see operators faithfully adjusting water valves, keeping alive a technology that seems impossible running engines on lamp oil and water. Number 4. Steering wheel, starting cranks. Talk about multipurpose design. Some early tractors featured steering wheels that moonlighted as starting cranks. This ingenious solution appeared primarily on John Deere tractors from the 1920s through 1940s, turning the most basic control into a dual-purpose tool that exemplified Depression-era efficiency. The system was elegantly simple. The steering wheel featured gear teeth on its hub that meshed with corresponding teeth in the flywheel housing. Remove the wheel from its steering shaft, carry it to the side of the tractor, and insert it into the flywheel opening. Now you had a large diameter crank with excellent leverage for spinning the engine. The wooden rim provided a comfortable grip, far superior to cold iron crank handles. John Deere wasn't alone in this innovation. Some roomily oil pull models featured similar systems, and creative farmers adapted the concept to other makes. The advantage went beyond comfort. The larger diameter meant more leverage with less effort, crucial for high compression engines or cold starts. Plus, you couldn't lose the crank since you needed it to steer home. Farmers developed techniques specific to wheel starting. The removable wheel meant you could position yourself optimally, using body weight rather than just arm strength. Some operators kept an extra steering wheel permanently mounted in the flywheel housing, eliminating the constant removal and reinstallation. This practice was particularly common on tractors with mounted corn pickers where the standard hand crank location was blocked. The system disappeared as electric starters became standard, but the concept lived on. Many farmers still keep old steering wheels as wall decorations, remembering when steering home meant first using that wheel to wake the sleeping iron giant. Number 3. Compression relief. Petcocks. Before automatic decompression systems, starting a high-compression engine required temporarily braking it with compression relief petcocks, small valves that vented cylinder pressure to make hand cranking possible. These brass fixtures, looking like tiny faucets sprouting from cylinder heads, were standard on American tractors from the 1910s through 1940s. The operation sequence became a ritual for farmers. Open petcocks, spin the engine to build flywheel momentum, then quickly close them and hope the stored energy carried through compression to start. John Deere two-cylinder tractors featured 2 petcocks, one per cylinder, requiring coordination to close both at the right moment. Multi-cylinder engines from manufacturers like International Harvester and Case meant managing multiple valves, a complex dance of hands and timing that required skill and practice. Different manufacturers had different styles. McCormick Deering used spring-loaded petcocks that snapped shut automatically. Case preferred manual versions with long handles for easy reach. Roomily oil pull tractors featured elaborate compression release mechanisms operated by a single lever, but all served the same purpose, making the impossible merely difficult. The petcocks did double duty. Beyond starting, they helped diagnose engine problems. Open one while running, steady puffing meant good compression. Weak puffs indicated worn rings or valves. They also served as cylinder drains, preventing hydraulic lock from water or fuel accumulation. Farmers learned to crack them open before starting after rain or long storage. Some creative operators discovered that partially opening petcocks created a crude engine brake for descending hills. By the 1950s, automatic compression release mechanisms integrated into camshafts replaced these manual valves. But visit any vintage tractor show, and you'll hear the distinctive of petcocks being used, a sound that once echoed across every American farm. Number 2, unsynchronized manual transmissions. Modern operators spoiled by synchronized gears or hydrostatic drives would find early tractor transmissions nearly impossible to operate. These crash boxes, standard from the 1920s through 1960s, demanded perfect timing, double clutching skills, and acceptance that grinding gears was part of farming. The challenge was physics without synchronizers. Meshing gears required matching their speeds exactly. Missed by even a few RPM and teeth clashed like sword fights. The operator manual for a 1940s farmall stated simply, "Stop tractor completely before shifting." This wasn't a suggestion, it was the only way to shift without destroying gears. But real farming rarely allowed full stops. Operators developed techniques to shift on the move. Double clutching became arc clutch in, shift to neutral, clutch out to let gears spin down, clutch in again, pray, and shift to the next gear. Get it wrong, and the grinding sound could be heard across the farm. Some operators learned to match engine speed to ground speed so perfectly they could shift without clutching. a skill that took years to develop and seconds to prove wrong. The gear patterns themselves were adventures. 3 speeds forward was luxury. Some had only 2. Reverse might require a separate lever, sideways gate, or lifting a collar while shifting. Finding neutral in these patterns was like solving a puzzle while bouncing across a field. International Harvester's Farmall M featured a 4-speed that required lifting the entire shift lever to access reverse impossible with cold, wet hands. By the 1960s, synchronized transmissions began appearing, followed by power shift and hydrostatic options. But many farmers resisted, claiming synchronized gears were for soft operators who couldn't properly match speeds. Number 1, massive cast iron construction. The Hartpar number 3 tipped scales at 14,000 pounds, 7 tons of cast iron for 30 horsepower. This wasn't overbuilding. It was the only way engineers in 1903 knew to create structures strong enough for farming. These behemoths redefined heavy metal decades before rock music existed. Every component was cast: iron frame, wheels, gears, even seats. The roomily oil pull, nicknamed Kerosene Annie, featured cast components so massive that shipping required partial disassembly. These tractors didn't ride on the soil, they crushed through it. Turning at row ends required planning. Momentum meant these giants didn't stop or turn quickly. Getting stuck meant staying stuck. No neighbor's tractor could budge 7 tons of mired iron, but weight had advantages. Traction was unmatched. Steel wheels with lugs combined with sheer mass meant these tractors could pull anything. They were virtually indestructible. Cast iron might crack, but rarely wore out. Many survive today, over a century later, still operational. The weight also provided stability for belt work, anchoring the tractor against the pull of heavy equipment. Manufacturing these monsters required specialized foundries. Each major casting took days to cool properly. Machining required tools more common to shipbuilding than agriculture. Assembly meant overhead cranes and crews of workers. The Fordson Model F revolutionized design in 1917 by using a stressed cast iron block as the frame, eliminating separate frame rails and cutting weight dramatically. This unit frame construction inspired all future designs. By the 1930s, steel stampings replaced many castings, dropping weights below 5,000 pounds while maintaining strength. Today's compact tractors would fit in the shadow of these iron giants, yet deliver more power from less weight. Progress measured in tons shed. These 13 features tell the story of American farming's Iron Age, when men and machines battled the earth with steel wheels and raw determination. From hand cranks that tested your strength every morning to fuel systems that ran on whatever burned, these tractors embodied the ingenuity and toughness of the farmers who used them. While modern technology has made farming safer and more efficient, there's something lost in translation. The next time you see a restored antique tractor at a show, remember those obsolete features once fed a nation. Hope you found this journey through forgotten tractor technology helpful. If you enjoyed learning about these iron giants, hit that subscribe button and join us for more stories from America's agricultural past.